Hello, Jacksonites, and what? I knew you were gonna do that. Freaking butt cheek on a stick.
Thanks for my fuggy.
When? Hello, Jack. I'm gonna eat your ass. You're a turd. No. No, I don't believe you. Destroy All Monsters review. You're such a turd. Hello, Jacksonites. Welcome back to Super Kaiju Binge after a minute of pure interruption from the wife. Today, me and Trevor Boy...
Howdy, everybody.
We'll be reviewing the, not really, grand epic finale to the Godzilla franchise, Destroy All Monsters, released in 1968.
It's kind of like Friday the 13th, the final chapter wasn't actually the final chapter.
Not even remotely. You had 8 movies after that, whereas with this one, you've had 26.
Yep.
So, Trev, apparently you have a lot of nostalgia for this movie.
Oh, well, not a whole lot. It's just one of the first ones I ever saw. I mentioned this yesterday. Back in the day, the Sci-Fi Channel used to have this marathon they called Oh My Godzilla. They had a 1994 edition, and then they had one in 97 that added Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, and Godzilla vs. Megalon. And it was during that 97 Oh My Godzilla that I saw Destroy All Monsters and versus Ghidorah. So yeah, I recorded them on a tape. I actually still have the tape, but I only have the final battle from the movie on it because I recorded something else on there. I think All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, of all things.
Underrated sequel.
Yeah, it is a good movie. But yeah, anyway, yeah, so this was my first exposure to the whole aliens try to control the monsters plot device. So that's probably why in this iteration, it's probably my favorite use of it, even though it was actually the second time they did it. So yeah, anyway, it's one of my first, the only one besides versus Ghidorah that I saw on the Sci-Fi Channel. And it's remained a fave ever since.
Well, me, for myself, I don't really have that much nostalgia for this movie because it's not one that I really grew up with. And admittedly, it's kind of one of the last Godzilla movies that I ever saw. I got it off of Amazon because at the time I was really having the urge to complete my Godzilla collection. So I picked up 2 Godzilla movies. I picked up Megalon and I picked up Destroy All Monsters because also for quite a while, Destroy All Monsters was not super readily available to me. As you can see, this is the newer release from, I believe, Tokyo Shock from, I think, 2015 or 14, maybe. So I saw...
I think it was 2011.
Huh?
I think it was 2011 is whenever it came out.
Oh, so that, well, this is still a new-ish release. So, and it was pretty affordable, so I was like, okay, you know what? I still haven't seen this one, and I'm kind of curious about it, so I'll pick it up now. So I actually remember the very first time I watched this, it was towards the end of a 3-month-long period where I had my grandparents' house all to myself. I was finishing up high school for the last 6 weeks, or for the first 6 weeks of that, I was finishing up high school, and then I just had 6 weeks all by myself living there. So I was taking care of the house, keeping it clean, and just enjoying life, and also watching a shit ton of movies. And so I ordered this off Amazon, and of course, when it showed up, I was kind of excited. So I sat down and I watched the movie in one sitting, and I was kind of disappointed. The movie just did not blow me away, and it was not nearly as good as a lot of other reviews that I was watching said that it was. And actually, for a long time, I considered Destroy All Monsters to be one of my least favorite Godzilla movies. Until something happened.
You got the sickness.
Yeah, I have a bit of a confession for a lot of my older videos. So a lot of my older videos, I would do the reviews without having even watched the movie. Uh, a lot of times I would, especially if it was a movie that I was very, very familiar with, I would just talk about it through memory. Which that works for a lot of the movies I talk about, because generally now I talk about movies that I like. But there are just certain times where I've only seen a movie once or twice back then, and I wouldn't even rewatch it. I would just talk about it from what I remember. But nowadays, I try to make it actually, no, I do. I make it a rule that if I'm reviewing a movie, I need to rewatch it before I review it so that it's fresh in my mind. And doing that, it's actually made my opinion on a lot of previous movies that I've reviewed change. Hell, look at King Kong versus Godzilla. That's probably the biggest turnaround. And this one is right behind it. So my most recent rewatch of this movie, I actually did find myself enjoying the movie quite a bit. That being said, I still don't think this is one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. It may be one of the better alien invasion / Toho kaiju films, but purely as a Godzilla movie, I do find this to be a little bit, it leaves a bit to be desired. But I also do recognize that there are a lot of really, really, really good things going for this film. And I do think that this is a pretty decent movie nowadays. There was a lot of heart, blood, sweat, and tears that went into this movie. And I see that now, and it makes me appreciate it even more. So then, yeah.
So I would say that maybe not as a Godzilla finale, but maybe as a finale for the 60s Toho output, because it's really not just focusing on Godzilla. It's kind of a mix of all the different sci-fi movies they did in that
decade. Excuse me. Well, that is true. So as far as the production goes, per the waning popularity of the Godzilla series, special effects director Sadamasa Arakawa noted that Toho were going to potentially end the Godzilla series as, quote, producer Tanaka figured that all the ideas had just run out, off quote. Not even remotely the case. The film, of course, was written by Takashi Kimura, and I actually do think this is one of Kimura's better scripts. And also, fun fact, this is the very first Godzilla movie since Godzilla Raids Again to not be written by Shinichi Sekizawa. Takashi Kimura is credited... Huh?
It's also the first time Anguirus popped up since then.
Oh, yeah, there you go, too. Which he looks fantastic in this movie. Kimura and Honda's script developed the concept of Monsterland, of course being referred to as Monster Island in future films. As the films had several monsters who continuously return in the films, the location was developed to be a faraway island where the monsters are pacified. This tied other films not related to the Godzilla series within its own universe, such as Manda and Varan. The film features footage from Ghidorah Three-Headed Monster, specifically King Ghidorah's fiery birth scene, this being another Godzilla movie that also does use stock, like a prelude to the crutch of using stock footage in the 70s. Though it's not too bad here. There's only about a minute's worth of stock footage. New suits, of course, for Godzilla and Anguirus were constructed for this movie, while Rodan and Ghidorah's were simply modified from previous films, with Ghidorah having a lot less detail than he had in previous movies. But that being said, ironically, despite the fact that this movie was supposed to be the last, it was far from the last. And it was a pretty big hit upon its release, and of course spurred on Tanaka to continue the Godzilla series in more specifically 1971. We can get into our debate with Godzilla's Revenge, but we'll cross that bridge when we cross it.
Yeah.
So before we get to the plot, anything to add?
Oh, as far as the home video releases, ADV, which was real famous for a lot of anime and the Heisei Gamera trilogy in terms of U.S. releases, they had a DVD.
Oh God, the ADV dubs of the Heisei Gamera movies are just atrocious.
Yeah, so media. I think this and Megalon were the last two movies that Tokyo Shock really put out before they kind of fell off the map a little bit.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Recently.
Specifically, Megalon, I believe, was the very last.
Yeah, they also had some trouble with Toho regarding that. But they've come back with GAPPA with a Blu-ray release, which from what I've heard is an improvement from the DVD. So,
well, before we get into the plot, a word from our sponsor. And the word has been spoken. At the close of the 20th century, specifically 1999 in the film's English dub, all of Earth's kaiju have been collected by the United Nations Science Committee and confined in an area known as Monster Land, specifically, but known as Monster Island in future Godzilla movies. Located in the Ogasawara Island chain. In supplementary material, it's revealed that Monster Island is kind of like Hawaii. It's a collection of islands, which I think is a really cool idea. A special control center is constructed underneath the island to ensure that the monsters stay secure and to serve as a research facility to study them. When communications with Monster Land are suddenly and mysteriously severed and all the monsters begin attacking world capitals, Godzilla attacks it gets to this later. Dr. Yoshida, this being the final appearance of Jun Tazaki in a Godzilla movie.
Yes.
Dr. Yoshida of the UNSC orders Captain Yamabe and the crew of his spaceship, Moonlight SY-3, Yamabe being played for the final time in a Godzilla movie also by Akira Kubo, to investigate Ogasawara. There they discover that the scientists, led by Dr. Otani, have become mind-controlled slaves of a feminine alien race, identifying themselves as the Keylocks, who reveal that they are in control of the monsters. Their leader demands that the human race surrender or face total annihilation. Typical alien invasion stuff. Godzilla attacks New York City. Rodan invades Moscow. Mothra lays waste to Beijing, which is really jarring. Gorosaurus destroys Paris, although Baragon was credited for its destruction. It also doesn't help that Gorosaurus has the exact same roar as Baragon. And Manda attacks London. These attacks were set in motion to draw attention away from Japan so that the aliens can establish an underground stronghold near Mount Fuji in Japan. The Keylocks then turned their next major attack onto Tokyo and without serious opposition become arrogant in their aims until the UNSC discover, after recovering the Keylocks' monster mind control devices from all around the world, that they have switched to broadcasting the control signals from their base under the moon's surface. In a desperate battle, the crew of the SY-3 destroys the Keylocks' lunar outpost and returns the alien control system to Earth. With all of the monsters under the control of the UNSC, the Keylocks call King Ghidorah. The three-headed space dragon is dispatched to protect the alien stronghold at Mount Fuji, which apparently is the same area that Kong fought Godzilla, and battles Godzilla, Manila, Mothra, Rodan, Gorosaurus, Anguirus, and Kumonga. Specifically Godzilla, Anguirus, and Gorosaurus, more so throughout the fight. While seemingly invincible, King Ghidorah is eventually overpowered by the combined strength of all Earth's monsters and is killed. Full on killed. And refusing to admit defeat, the Keylocks produce their ace, a burning monster they call the Fire Dragon, which begins to torch Tokyo and destroys the control center on Ogasawara. Suddenly, Godzilla attacks and destroys the Keylocks' underground base, revealing that the Earth's monsters instinctively know who their enemies are. Captain Yamabe then pursues the Fire Dragon in the SY-3 and narrowly achieves victory for the human race. Fire Dragon is actually just revealed to be a flaming Keylock saucer and is destroyed by cryogenic missiles. With the Keylocks defeated, Godzilla and the other monsters eventually return to Monster Land to live in peace, thus ending the film. Trev?
I dig it. I still like it, even though there's one jarring flaw, which I'll get into here in a little bit. But yeah, I like this plot. I think there's, in comparison to Monster Zero or Astro Monster, take your pick, I think there's a bit more going on with the monster side of things, which is what I usually watch these movies for. But I will say that Monster Zero has a better human element to it. But at the same time, I just like the scope of this movie. I like the fact that it's, I'll get into it with my pros, but yeah, I like this plot.
Well, I actually do like the plot too. I agree with a lot of what Trev says. There's a lot more going on with this movie than I initially thought. And it does have a very similar feel to Invasion of the Astro Monster, which now that I think about it, I really need to take away one of my criticisms of Godzilla vs. Gigan. This feels like Invasion of the Astro Monster 2.0. But in some ways it's better because not only are there more monsters than in Invasion of the Astro Monster, but the monster element itself is a lot stronger. But where this movie does falter is the human element. I'm not going to say much more beyond that. I'll just save it for when I get to my cons. But one of the biggest issues with this movie, unfortunately, is the human element. But the scope, tone, and ambition of this movie is very, very, very strong. And I think it's a lot stronger than I initially gave it credit for. So, Trev, pros.
All right, pro number 1 of 6, although I think I might make it 7 as well because I just thought of another one. Number 1 for me is the effects. This is probably, out of all the Showa movies, you could really tell that was their focus for this one, is that they wanted to make sure these effects were top notch. Because they had that mentality that, okay, if this is going to be the finale for these
has to look tip top
that we're doing, yeah, exactly. We need to go out full stop, no holds barred, everything. And I mean, that's the main thing I marvel at. I mean, there's little things that I've started to notice, like during the assault on Tokyo. There's some things that kind of fall over, but that's like just like a little goof. That doesn't ruin the overall effectiveness of these scenes.
Rodan.
And, well, yeah, unfortunately, he's mostly just a prop. But that's because his suit, I think it's the same suit from the previous 2 appearances, but they really don't use it a whole lot. He really just kind of stands in place and wiggles around for a little bit. But I do really like the prop they use for him. I like how, he... on Monsterland or Monster Island, he goes down in the water and scoops up some dolphins. That's a really neat scene because it's like, Yeah, food. It's like, oh, instead of like a pelican getting some fish, it's this huge creature eating these poor little dolphins. So that's just one of those things that if you think about it, it's like, oh, poor Flipper. But yeah, just the props. Well, there are a few suits in here that you can tell they were used for other productions, but I don't think it really hurts.
Ghidorah.
What they do. Well, I mean, you can tell they want to use Baragon in the Paris scene, and like you said, his roar and everything. Or like whenever they say which monsters attack where, they say Baragon attacked Paris.
Well, I'll explain that when I get to my cons.
Yeah, he's actually mentioned a whole lot, so you could tell that they realized that he was a monster with potential in terms of what he could do. But like whenever the Kilaaks are making their underground base around Mount Fuji, it's mentioned that Baragon has been tunneling in that area. So he's a very, even though we don't really see him aside from his little cameo at the end where he waves at the camera, you can tell that he could be very utilitarian for their needs aside from just destroying things. But yeah, the effects of this movie are fantastic, and they're my number one pro for this. Pro number 2 is Monsterland / Monster Island. A very, very neat concept in my opinion, which apparently stuck for the fandom, or at least that first generation of fans, because we see it again throughout the 70s in stock footage, but it also pops up in Godzilla the series, where they actually, I'm not sure when did the Monster Island name start being used.
I think with Gigan. Yeah, I think it was with Gigan.
Yeah. And then they definitely reuse it for the version of it in Godzilla the series. But yeah, just a really neat concept. Of course, I'm wondering, well, I mean, the fact that we're here at the end of the 20th century, obviously technology has progressed a fair bit. It always made me wonder, how did they gather up which monsters were left and, corralled them on this particular island? They go into this particulars, like how they have a force field surrounding the area so that Rodan can only fly in a certain area. And there's also devices that produce a gas that keeps the monsters from going off into the ocean.
I think it's literally just monster repellent.
Yeah, pretty much. And you did mention something, Nick, when you were reading the plot. It is a bit jarring to see that Mothra is here on Monster Island, and she doesn't have the Shobijin. So it's one of those things where, I mean, it would be a neat universe-building exercise. It's like, okay, why are they not here anymore, and why does Mothra need to be confined on the island? I guess it begs the question that perhaps she doesn't have any control over her without the Shobijin. But it is one of those things where, like, well, Mothra's a big deal, so let's throw her in there, even though she's a larva again.
They should have just used Baragon if you ask me.
Yeah. So yeah, Monster Island is basically Jurassic Park for kaiju, and what's not to love about that, if you ask me?
Yeah, it's cool.
So yeah, definitely one of the lasting impacts of this movie. Pro number 3 is the budget, and I'll probably say / the scope. Yeah, they really put some money behind this, and although it's not feasible or realistic, I kind of wish they were able to do this for every single movie. Because imagine what they could have done had they had that amount of cash.
It had a 200 million yen budget, which I don't know what that equates to in dollars, especially in 1968. Let's see. Keep talking.
That's for sure. Yeah, so the budget for this movie really high. And again, they were under the impression that, okay, this is probably going to be our final stop for this franchise. So, does it come up yet, Nick?
Just keep talking. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I guess not much to say there aside from the fact that it's one of those things where you wish they'd been able to do it all the time, but under the mentality that this was going to be it. I mean, they put all their cards on there. So
$1.8 million.
1 point what?
$1.8 million.
Yeah, that's not bad. I mean, yeah, it speaks for itself. And speaking of which, pro number 4, to elaborate on that budget, the assault on Tokyo is very, very impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, the assault on Tokyo. I mean, it's mainly Godzilla and Rodan flying over, but we do have Manda kind of sliding through there. That's something that kind of, I wouldn't say it's a con, but it is interesting that Manda doesn't have the very dragon askew features that they're supposed to have. But I heard they might have done that to avoid confusion with Ghidorah. Although I think it's clear which is which. You know, Ghidorah is the one with 3 heads, and then Manda's just the very clearly aquatic dragon. So yeah, I don't know. It's always kind of stuck at.
They wanted to do a different design for Manda in Destroy All Monsters to differentiate that this is a separate Manda from Atragon. In Atragon, Manda looked very much like a cat dragon snake hybrid, whereas here, Manda they dropped the cat elements and they just made him like a snake-like dragon.
Well, yeah, because whenever I was a kid, I was always under the impression that Manda was a giant snake until you noticed the legs. You know, for
the tiny ass legs.
Yeah, which are barely there and just kind of useless. But I digress. Yeah, the assault on Tokyo, other than the final battle for this movie, I think is probably the most memorable effects-related scene.
Debatably.
It's just a really impressive display. It's a really impressive display of pyrotechnics and coordination of the monsters and what they're doing. So yeah, that's my 4th pro. Pro number 5 is music.
Yeah.
I really dig this. Really dig the score for this. Probably some of Akira's best military marches are in here. It gets off to a really good start. I think the opening, the way the title cards and everything come up, they kind of redid this again in Gigan, although it's probably a little bit cooler there with how it comes up like a laser, you know. But it did kind of remind me of that. Well, if you think about it, versus Gigan is really just kind of trying to rehash Destroy All Monsters to an extent.
Slightly. I don't think it's as much as a lot of people make it out to be, but a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely not a con, at least not for me. But I think that was probably Tanaka's mindset after he got out of the hospital during Ghidorah. And he was like, okay, what's something that is familiar? And it's either going to be like an Astro Monster plot or Destroy All Monsters. And that's probably why they went with that. But yeah, the score, the music, it speaks for itself. Probably some of the most memorable tunes in the franchise come from this movie, at least for me. So yeah, it's an A-class score. And the final pro for me, pro number 6, is the final battle.
Didn't you say there was 7?
Even though not... Yeah, I said 7, but then I put that under the budget. It was also the scope, because I think they go different. Yeah. So for me, the last pro is the final battle. Even though it's mostly just a few additions to the dynamic from Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster. Basically, Gorosaurus and Anguirus are helping out Godzilla. And Kumonga and Mothra are basically the silk net that kind of puts the final touch.
Yeah, that really stuck out to me. I like to see that Kumonga was like they were saying, "Hey, you can help." I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, yeah, probably even more useful than Mothra, because if they didn't do this, but if they wanted to, Kumonga could come in there and put a final kill on Ghidorah with the little needle that comes out of his mouth.
True, yeah, and his leg span is large enough to like keep Ghidorah pinned if he wanted to as well.
Exactly. So even though this final battle is impressive, I mean, if you think about it, they could have gone even further with it. And there's some set photos which show some of the other monsters that didn't actually see any action, but they are posed to where it looks like they're all participating. Yeah, it's kind of funny because Manda, Baragon, and Varen, they kind of just show up and they're like the audience watching it all play out.
Well, in the manga adaptation of Destroy All Monsters, they were included in all three of those monsters were included in the final battle, which is both a good and bad thing. But I'll explain that when I get to my cons.
Well, it's almost to the point where, there needs to be another enemy monster because clearly Ghidorah doesn't need this amount of monsters to take him on because it's just those primary 4 or 3 really who take him out. Yep. So again, despite the fact that, they could have done this and they could have done that, the final battle has always stuck with me as being one of the finest moments in the history of the franchise.
Yes. And I will just say this. I'm not going to include this as a con, but I just will say this is one of those examples where the original scripted ideas were a lot better than the initial film. Like, there was more action, there was more monsters, and the end final battle was much more epic. But again, I'm not going to include that as a con, but I just simply am stating, yeah, the original script would have been better.
Are you going to mention it at all later? Because I figure I'll just go ahead and say some things that were in that script.
Save it for the cons, for your cons.
Well, I only have one con, but yeah, I'll add it whenever you're talking about yours. So yeah, those are my pros.
I have 7 pros. A lot of them are pretty similar to Trev. Pro number 1 is I like the tone of this movie. So a couple months ago, I re-listened to at least all that I could download, all of the episodes of Godzilla Palooza from Zanzibar. I just listened to them as I worked. And one that really stuck out to me, and this is actually part of the reason why I was a little bit excited, but also kind of dreading watching Destroy All Monsters, is because just how he described the movie. It was a lot of stuff that I didn't really remember hearing when I first listened to the episode. Like Bill said that the film is very dark, and there's quite a bit of blood in this movie. And for being Takashi Kimura's first Godzilla movie, I definitely, in terms of its tone, he definitely does start out strong. This movie is quite a bit darker than a lot of other Godzilla movies that came before this. Actually, I think this is the darkest this series has been. Well, I wouldn't even really say it's super dark. It's just a lot more.
It takes itself.
Yeah, it's a lot more serious than a lot of, especially compared to Son of Godzilla. Like, this kind of feels almost like a palate cleanser in bringing the Godzilla series back to its roots. Like in the classic days of Mothra versus Godzilla and Ghidorah Three-Headed Monster, stuff like that. I also do like the addition of all the blood in this movie. There's both monster blood and human blood that we see in this movie. Like, people get shot. One dude commits suicide. We see surgery, seeing metal get pulled out of someone's skin. Literally, Akira Kubo rips his girlfriend's earrings off her ears, and like her hands are slathered in blood when she puts her hands up to her ears.
Which I bet all this blood, well, particularly with the monsters, I bet you Eiji Tsuburaya didn't like that.
Yeah, Eiji Tsuburaya is kind of infamous for being a bit of a kind of stick up his ass when it comes to violence, which kind of makes me wonder, would he have had an aneurysm seeing Godzilla versus Gigan?
The world will never know.
Yeah, who knows? So, yeah, I like this movie's tone. It's a very good mix of, I wouldn't even really say it's campy. It's just a really more grounded, more serious, and certainly more straightforward alien invasion monster story. And again, not to say that the previous 2 Godzilla movies were bad, but this does kind of feel like a palate cleanser in bringing the Godzilla series back to more of its traditional roots.
Well, it's funny because I would, had you not have mentioned it, I would have never known that King Kong escapes in this movie were both written by Kimura. But I guess in hindsight, I can kind of see it now, especially this one.
Oh yeah, this very much so does have a Takashi Kimura feel to it. Pro number 2 is this movie is very ambitious. There's a lot of ambition and a lot of passion and drive that went into this movie to make it as big and bombastic and epic as possible. Like it shows in the music, the story, the monsters, the monster action, and also the effects. There's a lot of ambition that went into this movie that kind of makes me wish sometimes that with all the good roots that they have with this movie, it's kind of a shame that the Godzilla series never really went past the, well, it comes close, but it never quite went past this bar in terms of the ambition. As much as I love the 70s era of Godzilla, that was just definitely a sign that Toho was just trying to exploit a big money-making property in order to save themselves. That's not necessarily a problem, but here they weren't just about solely making money. There was a lot of passion and ambition that went into this movie to make it as big and epic as possible, and I respect them for that.
Well, what you would notice in the 70s movies is that they would have an idea that would be a hit moderately, and then something would come out, and then the ticket sales would decline again, and then something else would come out like, so, Ghidorah did okay, Gigan did okay, but then Megalon started the dip, and then Mechagodzilla came out, and then the ticket sales went up again, and then finally Terror came out, Terror of Mechagodzilla, and then that was the lowest ticket sales they had in the whole series. So it was
to this day.
waning thing. Yeah.
Sadly, because that's a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Pro number 3 is the music score. Yeah, Akira Ifukube pulls out all the stops with this one. Holy shit. Talk about a good return to form. Again, not to say that Masaru Sato was bad in the previous 2 Godzilla movies. And also not to say that his music score is bad in King Kong Escapes. But fuck me. There's a lot of classic Akira Ifukube music that's delivered in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's very bombastic. It gets your blood rushing. It just makes you want to go out and join the military and fight monsters. It's very, very, very engaging, very entertaining to listen to, and very well done. I do feel like that Akira Ifukube was giving it his all, and he also had some time to flesh out this movie's score and make it more epic and bombastic. Pro number 4 is the aliens. I think. Hang on one. Yeah, pro number 4 is the Keylocks. They're very creepy.
Yeah.
I think these are actually, aside from the... Well, I also like the... I like all the alien races here, but... of course, these ones are distinctive because they're pretty much all female, for starters. You actually get to see another form of them. This is the first alien race where you see another form of them aside from them just being humanoids. When they're exposed to cold temperatures, they morph back into a ball of living metal, essentially, which kind of reminds me of Gok Body Snatcher from Hell, which came out this year as well.
Yeah, that actually adds to the creep factor, is the fact that they're really just sentient blobs of metal.
That too, yeah. But what makes them really creepy, specifically the leader, whenever she's on screen, she talks to you like this. She never blinks. She never moves her muscles.
No expression in the face.
And, Meadow thinks that she just looks like a thumb. But I just found her to... Huh? A sparkly thumb. Like if someone stuck their thumb in a unicorn's ass. Jamba. But no, I just found her to be very, very unsettling, and how she always talks to you like this and never once blinks. She kind of looked like an alien Japanese demon. Yeah, the Keylocks are great, and they certainly do have a sense of threat to them because of how easily they're able to take control over all these monsters. And that's another thing that goes to the ambition. They definitely do very well showcase the fact that the monsters are all over the globe. They kind of tried to do it with Invasion of the Astro Monster, and they succeed marginally. But here it's even better. It also helps that you definitely see the monsters destroying all over the world. You can tell it's Beijing. You can tell it's Paris. You can tell it's New York. And you can certainly tell that it's Tokyo. So yeah, the Keylocks, I think, are a pretty good alien race. They're creepy, they're unsettling, and they definitely do have a sense of threat to them.
Well, what's funny is that they never lose their temper with the people from Planet X. You know, they kind of started to get a little bit snippy, and you could tell they were upset when their plans were starting to falter. But the Keylocks, they're always very calm. They're very confident in the fact that they're going to win. Of course, they don't, but that confidence also adds to their creepiness.
And it leads to their downfall, too.
Yes.
Pro number 5 is, hang on one. Did I miss one?
Yeah, I think you were on 4.
Okay, no. 5 is the monster action. All the rampages throughout this movie are very, very entertaining to watch, especially Godzilla's rampage in New York. And, of course, the Tokyo attack is very, very fun to watch. Even though a lot of the destruction, pointed out by Brendan Tenold, comes from the fact that the JSDF have worse aim than stormtroopers.
Hey, think about it. Not only did this movie have Godzilla attack New York first, it was also the first movie where the armed forces actually did more damage than the monsters. So it did that before 98.
I knew you were going to mention that. But still, yeah, the monster attacks all throughout the movie are very, very, very fun to watch, and they're very entertaining. And they're helped by the fact that with pro number 6, the effects in this movie are stellar. Fucking stellar. All the sets look fantastic. They're very well constructed and very well detailed. The wireworks are fantastic. Now, this was the very first Godzilla movie where Sadamasa Arakawa was specifically in charge of in charge of the effects. And this showcases Arakawa's specialty, that being wireworks. Of course, when you have Manda wrap itself around a bridge in Tokyo, very, very seamless. It throws me off slightly because he moves so slowly, but I imagine that's just because the wirework was such a pain in the ass, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did that in one take and they just got lucky. But Manda looks great in terms of wireworks. All the monster suits here look exquisite. The new Godzilla suit, which this will be infamous because it starts to fall apart in Godzilla vs. Gigan, would be the number 1 most used Godzilla suit in the entire series. I can't remember what this one's called.
But hey, to that movie's credit, it does help the fact that it looks like he got his ass kicked. So,
true. Hang on one sec. Here we are. Anguirus looks fucking stellar in this movie. Absolutely stellar.
Yeah,
what?
Yeah, pretty much all the monsters in this probably look their best.
So Shingeki Goji is the name of the Godzilla suit used for these movies. Here it just looks fantastic. It's very well detailed. It looks literally fresh out of the box in this movie, and it looks fantastic. Anguirus looks fantastic. Ghidorah looks decent. There's a few shots where you can tell that Ghidorah's heads, the paint that they used for Ghidorah's heads, were starting to corrode it, and it was starting to deteriorate. But he looks all right. Anguirus looks great. Gorosaurus looks really good. His color is a bit more grayish blue, but his suit is still very well detailed. Manila even looks really good. Kumonga looks great. Mothra looks great. All the effects are good in terms of the wireworks. Even the blue screen effects in this movie, there's not that much of it, but a lot of the blue screen effects in this work is really, really solid. Mostly the blue screen work that's done when all the monsters are in like a foresty area. Like there's one scene near the middle where they discover the Keylock base under Mount Fuji, and there's a few dudes that are running from Godzilla, and you see Godzilla, or you see the guys on the ground, you see Godzilla in the background. It's obviously a blue screen, but it's a well done blue screen. Like there's no bleeding and no fuzzes around the outline of Godzilla with the blue screen. It just looks really, really solid. And there's another one that looks almost seamless where the men are hiding in the foreground, and you can see Godzilla walking around with, like, you can see his knees down. You can see him walking in the background. Blue screen work there is almost seamless. And of course, this will lead me into the final monster battle. Yeah, it's got some problems for me, which I'll get into momentarily, but it's very well done in terms of effects. It's very epic. It's very big in scope. It's very entertaining. And it's also quite brutal. Ghidorah gets fucked the fuck up in this movie. It also helps that Godzilla uses his atomic breath pretty effectively in this movie, but fuck, Godzilla stomps on one of Ghidorah's necks, causing him to spit up blood. Anguirus takes a chunk out of another one of Ghidorah's necks, and even Gorosaurus almost rips off one of his tails. And I think even Godzilla takes a bite out of Ghidorah's back in the beginning of the fight, too. So yeah, Ghidorah gets the shit stomped out of him. What?
But let us not forget that Manila performs the final killing stroke.
Yeah, by spitting out a smoke ring that strangles Ghidorah's middle neck. So yeah, the final fight is very distinctive. It's very entertaining and quite brutal, which was a refreshing change of pace for myself.
I agree.
And I think that's all of it. Yeah, the effects are great. The monster action is entertaining, and the final monster battle is a lot of fun to watch. Let's get to the cons.
All right, so I'm going to make this brief so Nick can elaborate. I only have one con, one thing that bugs me about this movie, and it's really minor, but the human characters are really just there to get us from point A to point B.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to talk about that too, because that's one of my problems with this movie. Go ahead, Trev.
Yeah, let's get it. No, I was just going to say there's usually, so like in comparison to Astro Monster, which is probably the most similar to this movie at the time, there's no Glenn and Fuji in this movie. There's no compelling bromance. There's no other side drama going on. It doesn't even really seem like Katsuo really cares that his girlfriend is under control.
Continue.
No, it just seems like he doesn't really care that she's under alien control, aside from the fact that it's causing a problem for the world. There doesn't seem to be any personal investment in that. You know? But yeah, there's just no sense of drama with the characters. They're all just there to like tell you, okay, this is happening, and then we got to do this about it.
Yep.
So yeah, go ahead, Nick.
So yeah, con number one for me is that the human cast in this movie is pretty bland. None of them are badly acted. My main issue with them is that they are just plot devices. They're here just to take us from point A to point B. There's no human drama to make them more interesting. Well, I mean, you could argue that, having with Akira Kubo, because I guess that the main female character is allegedly romantically involved with Akira Kubo, but
it seems like they had some connection. It seems like they have some kind of romance or something. I will say this for the cast, though. It's a lot of familiar faces.
Oh yeah, there's Yoshio Tsuchiya, Akira Kubo, Jun Tazaki, Susumu Kurobe, who would go on to play Shin Hayata in the original Ultraman show. Even Kenji Sahara is here, of course. There's a lot of familiar Toho actors, but they just don't have much to do other than just be there to be plot devices. It's not super well. Okay, no, it is kind of a bad thing. What?
Text me when you're done, and I'll come back home.
Okay.
Please.
It's kind of a bad thing because the movie focuses on them so much. The fact that they're not that interesting leads to con number 2. This movie not having it doesn't have a focus point. It doesn't know whether it wants to focus on the human drama or wants to focus on the monster action. Because they funnel so much money into the monster action, it's disappointing that this leads into con number 3. The monsters don't have a whole lot of screen time. That when they're on screen, the movie is 10 times better, but when they're off screen and they're focusing on the humans, it leads into con number 4, and that the fact that this movie kind of almost has Sinister 2 syndrome. It feels like a Toho sci-fi alien invasion movie on the other hand with the humans, and then on the other hand it has the epic full-scale monster invasion on the other, and the two just kind of don't really gel. It's a bit jarring when you go from all this human drama over here, and then you go to the monster action, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is a Godzilla movie. Hell, even Meadow, this being the very first time she ever saw this movie, was saying it is kind of ass if this would have been the last Godzilla movie because the monsters aren't in this movie that much. And yeah, that is very true. This leads to con number 5, I believe, is that despite the fact that it's called Destroy All Monsters, and yeah, Godzilla, Anguirus, Gorosaurus, and kind of Mothra have a decent amount of screen time throughout the rest of the movie, all the other monsters just have these brief cameos. And especially for fans of Baragon and especially Varan, it's really fucking disappointing and infuriating when they literally just cock tease you with all of these various monsters that just show up and wave at the camera and then they're not even in the movie. It's really, really, really fucking frustrating. Wow. Especially for me being a big Baragon fan. I think Baragon would have been a really good addition to the final battle against Ghidorah. Which will lead me into con number 6 is the fact that, yeah, Ghidorah is very outmatched and the final battle is very one-sided. It's entertaining to watch this final monster fight, but the fact that it's only Ghidorah and he's going up against technically 7 other kaiju, there's no real drama or weight into making you think, ooh, is Ghidorah going to win? No, Ghidorah is definitely going to get his ass kicked. This leads me to really, 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 really wish that either they used a different monster or if they were going to use Ghidorah, pair Ghidorah up with another monster to make it just a bit more interesting at the end and to make the stakes even higher. 2 monsters against 7 is way more interesting than just 1 monster against 7. Like, you could have had Ghidorah being the big heavy hitter and go up against Anguirus, Godzilla, and Gorosaurus, then have another monster to just take on the weaker grunts being Varan, Baragon, and Manda, for example. So, yeah. I just went through all of my cons in one fell swoop without looking once.
Okay, so you know what it is the fact that some of these suits have been used for other things. Well, like for Varan, for instance, they actually didn't have that suit anymore, but they did have the flying prop.
Yeah, so the explanations are understandable, but it is still a bit disappointing. So with Varan, this had been 10 years after the original Varan movie, So obviously by this point, they just did not have a functional suit, but they had the leftover flying prop from the original Varan, so they just repurposed that and used that for Varan in this movie, which also explains why he's so small. There's a lot of sources that state Varan is only 10 meters tall in this film. As for Baragon, because in the previous couple of years, Baragon had been reused for 4 different monsters, Pagos in the original Ultra Q, Niranga, Magular, and Gabora in the original Ultraman show, because they had to heavily remodify all those suits, converting it back to Baragon and also fixing Baragon's ears, because Baragon's ears are a bit different in this movie. They're like fixed back into the backwards position. It was too time consuming, and the ears were also apparently kind of fragile, which is why the Baragon suit wasn't used very much. But because this movie obviously had a bigger budget and they had more time to flush this movie out, that just kind of makes me think, well, why didn't you guys just make a new Varan suit and a new Baragon suit for this movie?
Well, it seems like they put their attention as far as new suits to the new Godzilla suit and Anguirus, and then they kind of refurbished what was either brand new, like Gorosaurus from the previous year, or like Ghidorah and Rodan. They kind of, well, like I said, they refurbished them. They gave Ghidorah back his gold paint or his gold color from the first movie. They didn't really do a whole lot with Rodan, but yeah, for any new suits, they put their attention on that. But anything else, they kind of just gave it a touch up.
Disappointingly so. And my last con number, what is this, 7? This isn't a huge one, but to me, it's too short. If they're trying to make this movie such a big epic film, it's only an hour and 29 minutes long. I feel like that's just a tad too short for what they were trying to do. If this movie was like an hour and 40 minutes, I think that would have been a much better runtime for this movie. Would have given them more time to show longer monster rampages and maybe even give some other monsters more time to shine in the spotlight. Again, not a huge one, but just in hindsight, I think they should have made this movie a bit longer.
Well, more to your point from earlier, where the alien invasion aspect and the monster stuff doesn't really seem to mesh, I would argue that Astro Monster has a similar problem, but the difference there is that
the human element is good.
It engages on a level that this doesn't. So, yeah.
Agreed.
Oh, I'll also say, as far as some stuff that they didn't film but was in like the script, Ebra was supposed to be in here. King Kong was supposed to be in here at one point. Maguma from Gorath. In fact, I do believe for the scene where they're trying to get to the base, the monsters that are guarding the base originally were going to be Baragon and Maguma.
Oh, and the Gargantuas were originally given a role too.
Yeah, so they clearly had some changes in the roster, but then they just kind of realized, yeah, we're throwing all this money at the movie, but there's only so much we can do. But like you said, Nick, if it was longer, that could probably have made a difference.
Yes, agreed.
Yep.
So actually, that's all I have to say. Yeah, this movie does have a lot of problems, but in that friggin' tangent that I just went through, I just pulled that out of my ass. So I'm actually impressed with myself for that. But my final thoughts on Destroy All Monsters. Trev, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm going to read this because I think from Wikipedia because I think it wraps it up pretty nicely. I'm not going to say this author's name because I don't want to butcher his last name, but he wrote for magazine Cinefantastique. He said, the film is too slim in its storyline, too thin in its characterizations to be considered a truly great film. But for the 10-year-old living inside all of us, it is entertainment of the most awesome sort.
Yeah, agreed.
And I will say that I have a lot of nostalgia for this one still. in spite of the fact that it doesn't engage in the way that it should with the human characters, I think to be one of the all-time greats. But I think in terms of concepts and, well, mainly the concepts, like I said with Monster Island, that's probably the most lasting concept from the movie. It did make an impact, even if it could have done a little bit better. So I'm probably going to give it a 7 out of 10 for my rating.
So my final thoughts on Destroy All Monsters, I think it's just a mixed bag. It's equally good and it's equally, not necessarily bad, but it's equally disappointing. There's a lot of good things that went into Destroy All Monsters, but the fact there's the flaws are aplenty is what holds it back from, in my eyes, seeing it as a true classic. I will say that this is probably like the end of an era for the Godzilla series and Toho overall. And I just don't think that the scale and scope would never again quite be this large. It's a bit disappointing, despite my love for the 70s Godzilla movies. So I will also be giving this a 7 out of 10. It's an entertaining film. There's a lot of good things about it, but it's got quite a few problems, unfortunately. But I no longer consider this to be one of my least favorite Godzilla movies.
Probably middle of the pack, I guess you'd say.
Yep. So, that being said, post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. Trev, you got anything to plug?
Nothing immediately. As I said the other day, if you've liked my input on Nick's channel, just seek out my channel. And yeah, there will be content coming along eventually.
Alrighty.
So there you go.
Look forward to the next 2 episodes where me and Trevor Boy will be reviewing War of the Gargantuas, out of order, and Godzilla's Revenge. Look forward to that. And as always, go out and, if you're near Mount Fuji and you see a whole race of aliens, you may want to run because there may be a plan to destroy all monsters. And I will see you guys in the next video.